My name is Emily, and I never thought that a single day could change my entire perspective on Black people. On June 18, 2018, I died. I crossed over, and in that moment, I encountered something that forever changed me. I met Jesus, and through that encounter, he showed me something about Black people that shocked me to my core. What I saw wasn't just a vision, it was a deep truth, a revelation that I am still trying to process to this day. But I know one thing for sure, this testimony needs to be shared. But before we start, please let me know where you're listening from. It will be nice to feel closer, even if we're physically apart. Also, don't forget to like and comment on what you thought about this near-death experience testimony. Let's have a fair and open discussion so we can learn from each other on this channel. Enjoy listening. For years, I had battled with anxiety and feelings of isolation, despite being surrounded by people. But on June 18, 2018, everything changed. A sudden heart attack, unexpected, sudden, struck without warning, leaving me gasping for breath, unable to move, and slipping into unconsciousness. I remember the overwhelming sensation of my heart slowing down, my body growing cold, and then, complete darkness. I thought I had lost consciousness, but it was much more than that. It felt as if I was in a completely different realm, disconnected from time and space as I had known it. There was no pain, no fear, just a deep, all-encompassing stillness. In that stillness, I felt a presence. A warm, loving energy, powerful yet gentle, enveloped me. At first, I couldn't see anything clearly. It was as if I were floating in an endless void, but then I began to see a figure approaching. The light around him was so bright it hurt my eyes, yet I felt no discomfort. It was pure light, radiating warmth, peace, and unconditional love. I knew without a doubt that this figure was Jesus. He smiled at me. "Do not fear, Emily," he said, "you are safe here." I couldn't speak, but my mind was flooded with questions. Why was I here? What was happening? And more than anything, why me? Before I could even process these questions, Jesus spoke again, as if reading my thoughts. "You have come because it is time for you to understand something important, something that will change how you see the world and your purpose within it." As he spoke, I felt myself being gently guided through what felt like an endless field of light. We moved together, and with each step, the world around me seemed to shift. I could sense that we were no longer in the physical world, but somewhere beyond it, somewhere timeless and eternal. Then, Jesus began to explain something that took me completely by surprise. "The world," he began, "has misunderstood many things, especially about my people. There is a group among you whose spiritual strength, whose resilience, and whose divine purpose have been hidden, even to themselves." I was confused, and I must have looked at it because he paused and looked at me with infinite compassion. "I speak of the Black people of your world. Their suffering has been great, but so has their strength." I felt a surge of emotion wash over me as he spoke. I had always been aware of the injustices that Black people had endured throughout history, slavery, oppression, discrimination, but I had never truly understood the depth of their spiritual journey, nor the profound purpose they served in God's plan. It was something beyond what I had been taught or what society had told me. Jesus continued, showing me visions. The first vision was of a young Black woman, chained and abused, her body broken by the weight of her captivity. Yet, despite her suffering, there was an undeniable strength emanating from her, an inner light that could not be extinguished. "This woman," Jesus explained, "is a symbol of the strength of all those who have been oppressed throughout history. Their pain has been great, but in that pain, they have found the divine light that lives within them." As he spoke, I could feel the weight of centuries of suffering, but also the incredible spiritual resilience that had been forged through that suffering. It was as if I could see the entire history of Black people in an instant, their triumphs, their struggles, and the light they had carried through it all. "Many of my children do not understand the spiritual gifts that Black people carry," Jesus said. "Their resilience, their capacity for love, and their deep connection to the divine are not a coincidence. They are part of my plan. They are the ones who have kept the flame of hope alive in the darkest times." I was overwhelmed with emotion. Jesus showed me more visions, of Black men and women in the civil rights movement, standing tall in the face of hatred and violence, their spirits unbroken. He showed me the joy and the sacredness of Black culture, the music, the art, the dance, and the way these gifts were expressions of the divine presence within them. These gifts, Jesus said, have been a source of healing for the world. The music that lifts the soul, the art that speaks to the heart, the dance that transcends the physical, all of these are expressions of the divine light that has been passed down through generations of Black people. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. I had never considered the possibility that the suffering and oppression of Black people could have such profound spiritual meaning. But as Jesus spoke, it all made sense. I had always considered myself a kind person, someone who believed in justice and equality, but I realized how limited my understanding had been. I was being shown something much deeper, something that reached far beyond the surface of the injustices that I had witnessed in my life. The truth of what Jesus was revealing to me was not only about history but about divine purpose, a purpose that transcended race and culture. "Emily," Jesus said, "the world has not yet understood the full scope of my plan. People look at suffering and believe that it is a sign of weakness, of failure. But in the case of my Black children, their suffering is a part of their strength, their journey of redemption and grace. They have been tested in ways that others have not been, and through that testing, they have found a deeper connection to me." I could feel the weight of his words in every fiber of my being. I had always known that people who had endured hardship carried a unique strength, but this was something different. This wasn't just about survival, this was about divine purpose. "You see," Jesus continued, "when I created the world, I knew that each of my children would have a specific role to play. Some would be born into privilege, others into hardship. But the hardship, the struggle, was never meant to be a punishment. It was meant to shape them, to forge their souls, to make them stronger in their connection to the divine." As he spoke, I was shown a vision, this time, a vision of Africa, the cradle of civilization. I saw the ancient civilizations of Egypt, Nubia, and the kingdoms of West Africa, and the people there were vibrant, strong, and full of spiritual wisdom. I saw the elders, the shamans, the healers, those who had always known the divine truth. They had a connection to the spiritual world that was different, more profound. The African people, I realized, had always carried within them the knowledge of their true identity as children of God. But then the vision shifted, and I saw the dark period of history, enslavement, oppression, and suffering. The pain and trauma were unbearable to witness, but Jesus showed me something powerful. Even in the darkest times, the divine light within these people had not been extinguished. It had been hidden, buried beneath the weight of violence and hatred, but it had never been destroyed. "I want you to understand," Jesus said, "that the strength of my Black children comes from a divine source. It is not something that can be taken away. No matter how much the world has tried to break them, no matter how much hatred has been directed toward them, they have remained unbroken. They are a testament to my love, my grace, and my plan." As I continued to process what Jesus was revealing to me, he took me to a new place. This time, the scene before me was not one of suffering but of celebration. I was surrounded by a community of Black people, men, women, children, dancing, singing, and celebrating life. The energy was electric, filled with joy and a sense of unity that was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The music was the first thing that struck me. It was unlike anything I had ever heard, rhythmic, soulful, and full of passion. The beat of the drums seemed to resonate deep within me, calling to something inside that I didn't even know existed. It was a language, a form of communication that went beyond words. The music wasn't just for entertainment, it was for healing. "Look closely," Jesus said. "This music, this rhythm, it is a gift from me. It is a way for my Black children to communicate with the divine. The rhythm of the drum is the heartbeat of the earth. When they play it, they connect with the pulse of creation itself." I watched as the people danced. Their movements were fluid, graceful, and powerful, as if they were channeling the energy of the universe itself. It wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. Every step, every gesture was an act of worship, a form of prayer. I could feel the divine presence in the very air around me. "These gifts, Emily, are not to be taken lightly," Jesus said. "They are a reflection of the sacred bond that exists between my Black children and the divine. The music, the dance, the art, they are expressions of their spiritual truth, and they have the power to heal, to uplift, and to transform the world." As he spoke, I felt my heart expand with understanding. The gifts of Black people were not just a source of joy, they were a conduit for divine healing. I realized that I had taken these gifts for granted, seeing them as something separate from spirituality. But now I saw the truth. They were a form of divine expression, a sacred language that connected the soul to God. Now, Jesus said, I will show you how the spiritual strength of my Black children has shaped the world. Though the world may not see it, I have used them to carry out my divine plan, to spread my message of love and truth, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. The vision shifted again, and this time, I saw the civil rights movement. I saw the marches, the protests, the speeches. I saw the faces of heroes like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, and countless others who had fought for justice. I saw their unwavering faith, their belief in a higher purpose that drove them to stand up for what was right. I saw the churches, filled with Black congregations singing hymns of hope and strength. The power of their voices filled the air, shaking the very foundations of the earth. These people, Emily, Jesus explained, were the ones who carried my message of love, of justice, and of equality. They did it not just with words, but with their very lives. They were my instruments of change, and their faith was the source of their power. As I watched, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude and awe. The Black people who had fought for justice had done so not just for themselves, but for the entire world. Their strength had been the catalyst for change, and their spiritual connection to God had been the driving force behind it all. This is why, Emily, Jesus said, you must share this message with the world. My Black children are not inferior, they are not to be oppressed or marginalized. They are the bearers of divine gifts, and their role in my plan is crucial. It is time for the world to recognize the truth of who they are and the importance of the role they play in my divine plan. I felt as if I was floating, yet deeply rooted, standing at the intersection of time. The weight of the moment was unlike anything I had ever experienced. As Jesus spoke, the world around me seemed to shift, becoming more vibrant with each word. I could see through the ages, the history of oppression, yes, but also the unyielding flame of survival that had burned through every dark period. I understood now why the Black community, despite centuries of suffering, had endured so much and continued to rise. Their suffering wasn't a random tragedy, it was part of a divine blueprint, designed to lead the world into a greater understanding of justice, love, and spiritual truth. I could feel, deep within, that this was the essence of God's plan. It wasn't about pain for pain's sake, but about transforming that suffering into something that would fuel global awakening. You have seen, Emily, the way Black people have been shaped by generations of hardship. Their resilience is unmatched. But the world does not understand the depth of their strength. Their struggle has always been for a greater purpose, and it is through this struggle that they are aligned with my will. Jesus spoke, as though he was directly guiding my understanding, showing me what had long been hidden. The vision unfolded before me like a movie reel, but each scene was filled with such clarity, it felt as if I was living it. I watched the slaves being brought to America, shackled and separated from their homeland, their families, and their traditions. The anguish on their faces was heartbreaking, yet there was a profound courage within them that I hadn't understood before. Even in captivity, they carried the seed of freedom within their souls. I could feel the collective pain, the lashings, the inhumane treatment, the heartbreak, but I also felt something else, the profound spiritual strength that had been nurtured in the midst of this torment. Jesus explained it to me. The pain they endured, Emily, was not without purpose. Through their suffering, they found a way to call out to me, to seek refuge in my love. The strength to survive came from me, and I have used that strength to ignite change in the world. They were my vessels, chosen to endure, to carry the torch of freedom, and to reveal my love in ways that would not have been possible otherwise. The scene shifted, and I was now standing in the midst of the civil rights movement. I saw the faces of those who had fought so hard for justice, people like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X. Their faces shone with a quiet but determined strength, as if they knew their mission was greater than themselves. As I stood there, I could feel their faith, their burning belief that God's will would prevail, no matter the odds. These were my warriors, Emily. They knew the power of love and the importance of justice. They understood that by standing firm in their faith, they were not just fighting for their own freedom, they were fighting for the freedom of the entire world, Jesus said. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for these heroes. Their fight for justice, their unwavering courage, was not just for Black people but for all of humanity. Through their resistance, they had transformed the hearts of millions, challenging the world to confront its deepest injustices. I realized that the civil rights movements, through peaceful protests, civil disobedience, and tireless activism, had not only transformed society. They had served as a crucible where the true meaning of justice and equality was forged, a process deeply rooted in the spiritual traditions of Black people. As I walked with Jesus through the history of oppression, I began to see the profound role that faith had played in the resistance. The Black church had always been a central point in this struggle, both a place of refuge and a sanctuary for spiritual growth. I could hear the hymns, the sermons, the calls for justice that had echoed through the walls of those sacred buildings. These churches had been the incubators of change, the birthplace of hope. The Black church, Emily, is not just a building. It is a living, breathing entity, an instrument I have used to shape history, Jesus said. It was in these places of worship that my Black children found their strength, their hope, and their voice. The gospel they sang was not just music, it was a battle cry, a declaration of their unshakable faith. I felt the music of the hymns reverberate through my soul, each note calling me to stand alongside those who had fought for justice. I understood now why the faith of Black people was so unyielding. It wasn't born out of privilege, but out of necessity. It had been their anchor in a storm of hatred and injustice. The church to them was a sacred space where they could commune with the divine, where they could remind themselves of their inherent worth, and where they could fuel their mission to change the world. The Black church wasn't just about individual salvation, it was about collective liberation. After experiencing the depth of this divine understanding, Jesus turned to me. Emily, you have seen my truth, but the world has not yet fully understood it. It is time for you to share this message, to tell others about the strength, the beauty, and the power of my Black children. They must know that their suffering was not in vain. They must understand that they are an integral part of my divine plan. At that moment, I felt the weight of his words. The mission was clear. I was to share the truth of what Jesus had shown me, to reveal the divine purpose of Black people and their role in God's plan for humanity. I understood that this was not just about sharing a story, it was about shifting the narrative, changing the way the world viewed Black people, and helping others recognize their divine purpose and strength. The world has long misunderstood the role of Black people in my divine plan, Jesus continued. They have been labeled as inferior, oppressed, and broken. But in reality, they are the bearers of my divine gifts. It is time for the world to recognize their spiritual power, to acknowledge their contributions, and to embrace the fullness of who they are. I knew then that my life would never be the same. The knowledge I had received wasn't something I could keep to myself. It was too important. It was a truth that had to be shared with the world. And so I began my journey to write, to speak, to teach, to advocate for the recognition of the sacred gifts of Black people. As I stood there, enveloped in the divine presence of Jesus, my mind began to process all that he had revealed to me. The deep, unspoken truth that had been shared now sat heavy in my heart. My life had been forever altered. I was no longer the same person who had entered that moment. What had I truly understood before? And now, what was expected of me? The burden felt both incredibly humbling and deeply empowering. Emily, Jesus said, you have only begun to see the fullness of my plan. There is so much more. You must carry this truth to those who cannot see, to those who are still in the dark about the divine worth and purpose of my Black children. The world has underestimated them for far too long. I felt his words stir within me, igniting something that had been dormant, something I had not fully realized was part of my purpose. It was as if he had handed me a torch to carry, one that would shine through the darkness and reveal the truth for all to see. You are a messenger, Emily, Jesus continued, and this message is vital. You must show the world how my love for them transcends everything, how their struggles have not been in vain, how their path was set in motion by a divine hand, and how they will be honored in the kingdom of heaven. I could sense the urgency in his words. There was no room for hesitation now. My purpose was clear. I was to tell this story, not just as a personal experience, but as a universal truth that applied to the entire world. I needed to share what I had seen, what Jesus had shown me, and make it real for others. The vision shifted once more, and I found myself standing in front of a vast ocean. I saw not with my eyes, but with the eyes of my soul, how the tides of history had shaped the Black community, how the waves of injustice, discrimination, and hatred had battered them, but how they had risen each time, stronger, more determined, more filled with the divine love of Christ. There was an eternal strength in them, one that came directly from God. "These souls, Emily," Jesus said, "have been part of my plan since the beginning. They have suffered so that the world could learn empathy, compassion, and justice. Their history is not one of mere survival, it is a history of overcoming. Their hearts are my hearts, and through their pain, the world has been forced to confront its deepest flaws." The ocean swirled, and I felt the weight of generations. I saw the scars of ancestors, both the living and the departed, woven together in a tapestry of history. Every individual, every life lost, every hardship faced was not just an isolated event. It was part of a much larger divine narrative, a story written by God, one that transcended human understanding. Each struggle, each injustice was part of a bigger picture, leading humanity toward greater wisdom. As I continued to walk beside Jesus, I felt that the veil of ignorance had been lifted from my mind. I could see how the world's history had twisted the truth, how it had misrepresented and undervalued the contributions of Black people. But Jesus had revealed the depths of their value to me, and I understood now that the Black community was far more than what the world had portrayed. They were spiritual warriors, playing an essential role in the divine story of humanity. "It is time, Emily, for the truth to be spoken," Jesus said, as we approached a hilltop overlooking a vast city. This city represents the world, filled with both light and darkness. There are many who walk in ignorance, but there are others who are waiting for the light to reach them. They need to hear this message. The world needs to know that the Black community is integral to the fulfillment of God's plan. I could sense the enormity of this task ahead, but I was no longer afraid. The truth had been planted within me, and I was determined to let it grow. As the vision continued, I saw myself standing before large crowds, speaking with a powerful conviction that wasn't mine. It was the voice of God, speaking through me, as I shared what I had learned. I saw the faces of listeners, people from all walks of life, their expressions shifting from confusion to understanding. And then, the spark of transformation took root in their hearts. They began to see with new eyes, to understand the divine purpose of Black people, and to honor them as they should have all along. The vision then shifted to a scene that I couldn't fully comprehend at first. I saw a vast garden, lush and vibrant, filled with flowers of every color imaginable. There were people of all races, backgrounds, and beliefs gathered in this garden, working side by side, united in a common purpose. But what struck me the most were the Black individuals at the forefront of the work. They led with humility, wisdom, and love, guiding the others as they all worked together to cultivate peace and harmony. "Emily, do you see?" Jesus asked, "This is what I desire for the world, to see people united in my love, to see the Black community not as oppressed, but as leaders, healers, and servants of my kingdom." I nodded, unable to find the words. I had seen it now, the vision of a united world, where Black people were not only honored but also embraced as vital parts of the global mission to build a peaceful, just society. This was the truth Jesus had shown me, and it was my job to carry it forward. When I finally returned to my body, I felt the weight of this responsibility. I had been given a sacred mission, and I could not ignore it. My life would no longer be the same. I was a vessel, chosen by God to carry His message of truth to the world. The transformation was not instantaneous. I had to learn how to integrate the profound understanding Jesus had shared with me into my daily life. There were challenges, of course. It was not easy to speak these truths, to stand up in a world that was still so entrenched in its biases and misconceptions. But I felt the power of Christ behind me, guiding me every step. I began by sharing my story with those closest to me, friends, family, and colleagues. Slowly, the message spread. People began to listen. Some were skeptical, but most were moved by the truth. They could feel the weight of it, the urgency of it. They began to question their own beliefs and assumptions about the Black community. The story was unfolding. The truth was being shared. And I, Emily, had become a messenger of that truth. The journey was not over, but the seeds had been planted, and I knew that I was part of something much larger than myself, I had been entrusted with a sacred duty, and I would continue to carry the message forward, sharing the truth of Black people's divine purpose and the profound role they had played in the history of humanity.